I'm excited to show you the modern honeycomb shawl with a different weight of yarn today. I released this pattern quite a few years back and I use a fingering weight hand dyed yarn and it's been super popular and it's absolutely gorgeous. But I thought it would be fun to redo this pattern and show how when it comes to shawls or wraps, you can really substitute with most any yarn you want. It's going to size a little bit different, but this is a perfect example of something that if it sizes bigger, that's just fine and it's going to work out great. For this project, I'm going to be using this Yarnalia Wonder in the gold dust and the snow colors. These are really pretty. So this is a 30% wool, 70% acrylic. I really like the stitch definition on this. I like the ply and it's pretty squishy, but it's not itchy. So this is going to be amazing for this modern honeycomb shawl. I will also be trying out an eye hook of 5.5. So for the fingering weight, I used a 4mm G hook. For this one, we're going to go up quite a bit and we're going to try this 5.5mm. The important thing is to swatch. You may decide you want to go down to an H hook. When I did it, I felt like I didn't quite like the drape, but if I get going here and I'm not digging the drape, you can always adjust that. So it's always good to check your gauge, but more importantly for a project like this, it's more about, do you like the drape of your fabric that you're creating? Then you will also need a pair of scissors and of course a yarn needle to weave in those ends. Let's go ahead and get started. Now this pattern uses two colors and you could really start with whichever color you want first. They're just going to rotate between each other, so you can really decide which color you want as color A and color B. The amount of yarns they use are very evenly placed. It's half and half almost down the line. So you can choose to start with whatever color you want. I'm starting with this color because it's going to be much better on camera today. So we are going to start with a chain 12. Now for this pattern, I did a bit of a revamp on it because it's much cleaner if we do stacked single crochets at the beginning of the rows instead of chains. So in the very first chain from the hook, I'm going to insert my hook into that chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops on the hook. Then I'm going to insert my hook right back into the left horizontal bar here. So I'm working still into the same stitch. And then I'm going to pull up another loop, yarn over and pull through both. This is a stacked single crochet. This is a great way to get straight lines on the edges, and this will count as our first stitch. Now it's very important, if you've never worked these before, to place a stitch marker in that stitch. It's very easy to work around it, so you'll want to make sure you're keeping track of that stitch at the end of the row. So I highly recommend placing a stitch marker at the beginning of each row for this pattern until you really get used to these stacked single crochets. And now we are going to double crochet into the next 8 stitches. Luna. After working those 8 double crochet stitches, now we will chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the last 2 chains. And then we can go ahead and turn for the end of row 1. So as you can see, we haven't worked a large amount of fabric on one side because we'll be increasing as we see these hexagons form. And so one side of our crochet shawl will be increasing. So this is it. It's 12 stitches for the very first row. And now we're going to turn our work and do row 2. Now for row 2, we are going to be doing that stacked single crochet right into that very first stitch. So no chaining. It really does create a nicer edge. And that is our very first stitch, and you can go ahead and mark that stitch. Then we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the next 9 stitches. And that includes that chain space. That chain space needs to have a double crochet in it as well. We're not skipping that chain space. And now after double crocheting 9, when we get to this last stitch, we are going to place 2 double crochet stitches into that last stitch, and then we'll be ready to turn. So we have increased this row by 1 stitch. So instead of 12, now we are at 13 stitches because these chain spaces are counting as a stitch count. Now for row 3, we're going to turn our work, and for this very first stitch, we are going to do a stacked single crochet stitch and then also a double crochet stitch into that very first stitch. So we've increased by 1, and then we are going to double crochet into the remaining 12 stitches. So we have a total of 14 double crochet stitches for row 3. Once you get to the end of row 3, we will turn and do row 4. Now for row 4, we're going to start with a stacked single crochet as the first stitch in the row, and go ahead and mark it. And then we are going to double crochet 12. So we're double crocheting until the last stitch in this row. Now for the last stitch in row 12, we are going to do 2 double crochets into that last stitch, increasing our stitch count to 15. Now for row 5, we will be doing a bit more of a dramatic increase because we're going to be adding another hexagon on here. So I'm going to turn my work, and for row 5, we are going to be doing some chains. For row 5, we are going to be doing some chaining. So we are going to chain 9, and then in the very first chain from the hook, we are going to do a stacked single crochet. So this is how we are expanding out our shawl, how we're doing some of these larger increases for these hexagons, is we're doing some chains and then working back across them, and we're making our shawl wider. So now that I've done a stacked single crochet in the first, then I'm going to do double crochets into the next 8 stitches. And now we are going to do a chain 1, skip 1, and then double crochet 14. So the chain spaces are what create that hexagon look. It's almost like working a fillet style crochet, where these chain spaces, especially once it's blocked, are what really define those hexagon look in this pattern. So at the end of row 5, we have increased our stitch count to 24 stitches because we chained some out this way and added quite a few stitches to our row. And now we're ready for row 6. For row 6, we are going to start with a stacked single crochet for those nice straight edges. And then we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and then double crochet 11. And then we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and then double crochet 9. But remember, these chain spaces, they count as stitches, so we're going to double crochet into that chain space after skipping 1. And then I'll continue to complete these 9 stitches, and we'll have 1 stitch left in the row. And then for the very last stitch in this row, we're going to be doing an increase. So we're going to do 2 double crochet stitches into that last stitch, which means our stitch count is now 25 stitches for the end of row 6. Now we're going to turn and work row 7. For row 7, we will start with a stacked single crochet. That counts as our first stitch. I hope you're marking them. I would if I had brought stitch markers with me today. And then you are going to do another double crochet stitch into that very first stitch again. So we've increased, we've done 2 stitches into that first stitch. And now we are going to double crochet into the next 11 stitches. After double crocheting 11, we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and then double crochet into the next 9. After double crocheting 9, we're going to chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the last 2 stitches in the row. And that is the end of row 7. And we have a total of 26 stitches for this row, and now we're ready for row 8. For row 8, we are going to start by doing a stacked double crochet stitch into the first and mark it, and then we are going to double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And now we're going to be doing the part of the hexagon. We're going to be doing quite a few chain stitches here in skipping stitches because it creates this top border for this fillet style hexagon. So we will be doing a chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 1 4 times. So that's chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 1. And we're going to repeat that. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 1. So now we've done it 2 times. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 1. We've done that 3 times, and now chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 1, and now we've done that 4 times, and now we're going to do another chain 1, skip 1, and then we are going to double crochet 13. Now after double crocheting 13, we have 1 stitch left, and we are going to do 2 double crochets into that last stitch, which increases our stitch count again, and this increases to 27 stitches for row 8. Now we're ready to turn and do row 9. Now for row 9, we're going to be doing an increase here again by doing some chaining. So we're going to turn, and for row 9, we are going to chain 9. So this is just like we did down here. For row 9, after doing that stacked single crochet into the very first stitch, we will then double crochet 8. After double crocheting 8, we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into each of the next 13 stitches. After double crocheting into the 13 stitches, now we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet 9. And yes, we are double crocheting into those chain spaces as well. After double crocheting 9, we are going to chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the last 2 stitches. Now this is all I'm going to show on camera for this increasing portion because I've covered the basics and it would be boring if I continue to do every single row. So for rows 10 through 24, you'll continue doing these increases the way that we've done, working those chain 1 spaces, creating that hexagon look. And then you'll do rows 25 through 32. Those will not be increasing. So rows 25 through 32 are non-increasing rows, and you are going to repeat those rows for more times on top of that. And then you're going to come back because then we'll be talking about adding in our color B, our second color. So you'll be working through row 64 with your color A. You'll be increasing until row 24, and then you'll just be working rows 25 through 32 in the stitch pattern and repeating that 4 more times. So when you get to row 64, come on back. So now I am at row 65. I've worked all of these in this beautiful color. I'm absolutely enjoying it. But now it's time for us to start working with our color B. And I've worked the first part of this row 65. So I've done the stacked single crochet into the first, and then double crocheted 13, chain 1 and skipped 1, double crocheted 9, chain 1, skipped 1, and double crocheted 13 stitches. My next step will be to chain 1 and skip 1, and then we will be working with the color B to double crochet 9. But I want to show you how to change colors, and this is the way I change colors for anything I'm working really. So I haven't done my chain stitch. Whenever you're working through the last loops, whether it be a double crochet stitch, single crochet stitch, or a chain stitch, you'll want to yarn over with your new color before completing that last loop, which for this would be our chain stitch. Now I'm going to go ahead and skip 1 and double crochet into the next 9. So you can see that creates a better transition by yarning over and pulling through the last part of each stitch, whether that be a chain or a double crochet. Now I want to note that this is done in intarsia style, and what I mean by that is we are not going to be carrying our yarn along the back. If you need to use yarn bobbins, you can. If you have extra balls still, pull out that extra ball, because I'm not going to be picking up my color A on this other side here. I'm going to drop it and leave it over here for me to come back and work later. So now I'm coming back to where I need to change to my color A. Now before completing the 9th stitch of this sequence in the color A, I am going to grab my new yarn, yarn over, and pull through to complete that double crochet stitch. Now notice I have 3 strands coming off of this now. I've got my tail end here of the color I just grabbed. I've got my color B, I've got my color A over here, and a color A over here. So I have more than one ball going. This is called an intarsia style. It works this way best because you won't have any yarn to carry, and also it's really nice from either side. So when we are working a section of color, we're not carrying on the back. We're simply working that section, switching to our new color, and we might need to put them on bobbins. So now I can go ahead and complete this row by doing a chain 1, skipping 1, and double crocheting 13. And we can see where this intarsia style of crochet color work is really nice, because I'm going to be creating a hexagon kind of by itself here in the color B, surrounded by color A. And that's how you're going to change your yarn when doing the color work through these next sections. So we're still working the stitches that we are familiar with. We are just going to be changing colors in certain spots until we get to the point where we're going to be decreasing. By the time we're decreasing again, we will be working completely in the color B. So we're kind of working some intarsia, and then it will transition to the color B until we get to the point where we decrease on the other side. Now I also want to talk about what to do with your yarn when you're working this intarsia style. Now sometimes you can fasten off at every row and have a ton of ends to weave in around these hexagon shapes. Or like what I prefer is to simply work your yarn up the row as you go. So for this next one, I would be changing right here to my color A by yarning over and pulling through. And I really don't think that these strands that pull up are that noticeable, but if you really want to make it even less noticeable, here's a little trick that you can do. I'm going to chain 1 and skip 1 here. And then when I yarn over and insert my hook into the next, I'm actually going to come back right over here and pick up that strand and then finish my stitch. And it just kind of pulls it over a bit and hides it a bit better. You can even on this last loop, if you want to do a little bit of gymnastics here, you can wrap around your stitch to grab it even more. And that way that strand is hidden and it's carried up without having to weave in a ton of ends. But I will note, whenever I am done with the color, as we can see down here, when I finish an area, I do have to fasten off. So I will have a few ends to weave in to have my starting strand for this white section here and then the ending strand, because when we're done with it, we can fasten off that area of intarsia. But it's coming along nicely. I do recommend carrying the yarn at the side just simply because it does make things go a bit faster, but it's completely up to what you prefer. So now that we have finished row 143, we are on row 144. Now the thing about this one is we will be fastening off our yarn. So here's where we're going to start decreasing. So I turned after row 143 and I'm going to go ahead and fasten off my yarn, and I'll leave a tail end to weave in later. So this is how we're going to do our decreases. We will be fastening off and then reattaching. So for row 144, we are going to join to the 13th stitch in this row. And then we are going to start by doing a stacked single crochet. And then we will double crochet into the next 14 stitches. Then we are going to chain one, skip one, and double crochet 4 times. So you're probably noticing this pattern repeat at this point. We're just starting our row off by cutting out some stitches here by just simply skipping and not working them. And then we continue to work this row in that stitch pattern that we are used to. And so we'll work this for quite a few more rows until we do the same thing, and we'll just be taking off a hexagon every single time we decrease to decrease this down. So we're not like doing any decreases with our stitches. We're simply fastening off our yarn and starting in a different section of the segment and then repeating our established stitch pattern as we go. And that's how you'll decrease this shawl. So now after completing row 145, we are going to turn our work, and for row 146, we will be doing another style of decrease in this row. We're going to start row 146 with a stacked single crochet. And then we are going to double crochet 2 stitches together. Then we will double crochet 9. And then we will chain 1 and skip 1 and double crochet 11. And continuing in that pattern repeat across this row, but this will help decrease this side so that the hexagon looks nice along this edge, and it looks like we're making a space for an empty hexagon here. So we'll be doing some decreasing on some rows by working a double crochet 2 together. Now when working row 147, I started by doing a stacked single crochet and then doing a double crochet in the next, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 9, and then chain 1, skip 1, double crochet 13, and then repeating that again. And so for this last section, we are going to start by doing a chain 1, skip 1, and then we are going to double crochet 8. And for the last 2 stitches in this row, we are going to do a double crochet 2 together. And now we can turn and get ready to work row 148. Now for row 148, we are going to go ahead and do what we did over here, and we are going to fasten off our yarn. And then we are going to join at the 10th stitch in this row. And then we are going to stack single crochet for the first stitch and then double crochet into the next 14. So we're going right back into our established repeat here where we're creating those hexagon looks and working those rows. So that is how we will be working the decreases along this edge, and it works up pretty quick when you're decreasing to finish off this side. Now, after completing those decreases on that last side, you'll want to fasten off and weave in all of your ends and then block your shawl. I like to use the mats and the blocking pins, but you can also get it damp and lay it out on a bed. It really opens up the shapes of these hexagons and makes it curl less on the ends if you do go ahead and block it. It's almost like ironing your clothes and it looks really, really nice. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and you come back for more fun crochet projects soon.